public hearing is being held to present information to the public on the 2016 Community Development Block Grant Program. The programs available for funding will be discussed with specific information on a proposed project for low to moderate income owner-occupied housing rehabilitation. So, Sally, want to leave that?
I would let Evan Sanders, he can give you a nice overview
Thank you.
on it.
Mr. Sanders.
Mayor, the purpose of the public meeting this evening is to just present some general information about the Community Development Block Grant Program, CDBG for short, and opportunities within the program for funding and deadlines as far as funding submittals and requirements for those funds. First of all, of course, we've done a number of CDBG grants with the city over the most recent years. I think the last three we've done have been wastewater related for improvements to the wastewater system. So those are projects that are eligible. I'll back up a little and say these are HUD funds that are allocated to the state of Tennessee once a year. This year the state anticipates receiving in the mid $20, $25, $26 million worth of CDBG funds. And those funds travel through the State Department of Economic and Community Development. Department of BCD holds an open competition for eligible communities to compete for these funds each year. And those applications are due to Department of BCD on February 26th of this year. So we're in the process of putting together various applications for a number of different activities, and I want to kind of review what those possibilities are. As I mentioned earlier, we here at Crossville, we've utilized those funds for sewer improvements. So CDBG funds can be used for wastewater improvements, whether they be to existing systems and/or new lines to residents that are without service. You can also entertain the possibility of applications for water system and/or water line extension improvements. I know the county has done numerous projects over the years to extend lines to rural areas of the county that do not have potable water service. That's what they've used several CDBG dollars for. And I will say that of all the funds that go to Tennessee, probably about 80 to 85% of those end up going to water and sewer. However, there are two other categories that are eligible under the CDBG program that they also fund state funds annually. The third category is housing rehabilitation, and that is to address housing needs for owner-occupied units within a community. So those are funds that go to the city, but the city has an application process for people within a defined target area to apply for assistance. So funding can go into housing rehabilitation. And if it's not water, sewer, or housing, the final category is called community livability. And those are usually health and safety related projects such as fire department enhancement, ambulances, first responder units, sometimes drainage, and the latter, health and safety related. The grant max that a community can go after is $500,000 for water, sewer, or housing, and $300,000 for community livability. In the past, of course, you all know that we've, with sewer projects, been required to match a project. I think your match here is about within the 20 to 25% range right now. However, on a housing application, that is a 100% grant to the community, and the possibility of $500,000 grant. So those are the items that would be a possible activity to go after. I will say that the eligibility criteria is for all CDBG grants under this program is the community has to justify that they are, document that they are of 51% moderate to low income. In a housing situation, you're basically impacting a particular target area. In that target area, obviously you have document as well that they're a 51% low to moderate income before they can receive assistance. That's done a little bit on a preliminary basis on the front end and a much greater detail basis on the back end. And once the project's funded, applications go in February 26th. As I said, it takes several months for the applications to be reviewed. Probably not funded until October or November of this year. And at that point in time, then project implementation starts up, getting word out to the target area as far as potential coming in, getting information on the program and the rules and requirements therein. It's a competitive process. Just because we ask for funds, the city asks for funds doesn't mean you're going to get it. Last year they had 120 some odd applications statewide submitted for water, sewer, housing, and community livability. They funded, I think, 51 or 52 projects, about 40% of the projects, 45% of the projects funded. So it's very competitive. Housing applications even more so. They've been getting 8 to 10 applications a year and funding 2 or 3 each year statewide. So it's a very competitive endeavor. So that's the program in a nutshell. The purpose of the public meeting, and to provide that information and certainly answer any questions.
Thank you.
I've got.
Yes, sir.
What's the deadline on the date on this?
To have the application in, it's February 26th to have that into the state. That's their deadline date.
If we go into an area and we upgrade the housing, we were talking $500,000 or $530,000 or something.
525. Potential for a $25,000 bonus. Yes.
Okay. So we go in there with 525, and we have multiple houses. How's that bid out?
As far as for the actual work,
Yes.
the actual rehabilitation work, yes. The requirement is it does have to be bid, but we will not just allow. We go through kind of a pre-qualification process to qualify bidders. In other words, they have to have a contractor's license. They have to have certain insurances in place in order to be allowed to work on these units. And so there is, on the front end, what happens once the project's funded, there will be a solicitation made locally where qualifications are solicited and accepted, reviewed, contractors approved, and then the bids, say there's a short list of 5 approved contractors, the bids would go to those 5 contractors to provide a price on each unit.
On each individual one, it's not one lump sum.
That's correct.
So all of it goes bid out locally. Is there preferential taking of bids from disadvantaged contractors on this?
There is not preferential, no. There is encouragement to solicit what we'd call disadvantaged business enterprises, DBE firms, female minority firms as well. That is one of the requirements of the program, is to certainly solicit, but it is not, there are no requirements.
Okay, if a DB firm, let's just say, bids $10 and a non-DB firm bids $8, does it go to the DB firm?
No, sir.
Okay, very good. Well, you've answered my questions, thank you.
Well,
Excuse me, these, there's so many houses in this projected thing. So I'm assuming that someone goes in and decides what is to be done on each individual
Yes, let
house.
me
It's
give
not
a-
X amount of dollars per
let me give
house.
a brief rundown on that. You look at a defined area, you try and target an area that needs and could utilize assistance, and it has to be owner occupied. The state requirement, the grant agency requirement, is they really don't want any more than 10 houses included in an application. In other words, their preference is you go in and you really do as much code elimination and upgrade in one house that you can, and not try and take $500,000 and dilute it. buy 20, 25 houses and do a little bit here, a little bit there. So the requirement is now, instead of projects in the past going in for 20 houses, they will not allow you to go in for more than 10. And and those are identified in the application. Those houses would be identified for certain individuals. There would be included in the application some very preliminary cost estimates. They're not anything in stone, but there would be, okay, this, from a brief inspection, we can see roof issues, we can see plumbing issues, so on and so forth. So there would be cost projections. Everything, once you get funded, kind of switches around. Then you have to go through the process of actually getting the information out to the neighborhood, gathering the more detailed information from the homeowners as far as their eligibility criteria, which one is income, two is ownership, making sure we've got all the documents in place, and then we would send out an inspector to actually do a very thorough and detailed inspection to determine what the need is. So that's all post-funding. The application portion of things is just presenting to the state kind of a broad picture of the area and the need, and representing to them hopefully the competitiveness of the application. Does that answer your question along those lines?
How long after his project's completed can the homeowner sell the house?
Good question. On a housing rehabilitation program, there is a lien placed on the property for 5 years. And so say recipient A has a rehabilitation work of $50,000, a lien of $50,000 is placed on their property. The way that lien is removed is for each year they live in that property over 5 years, 20% of that lien goes away. So after 5 years, it's pretty clear. No money changes hands unless that property is sold within that 5-year lien period. So the intent, obviously, is someone that would go out, have their house fixed up, and 2 months later turn around and sell it. So the lien is in place for a 5-year period.
Any other questions?
I have one. We were going to research and find out what the strings were attached to this, to the community. Did we come up with anything? Shelley?
We did. We looked at the new HUD rule and provided you all with a copy of that summary. And the new HUD rule is really to provide more support to facilitate local decision-making on fair housing priorities and goals. Those are actually, and Evan can talk a little bit about that. We've had fair housing, that's been part of HUD forever. And the state actually gets the money and they set the goals, and we will enhance on that, and we actually do some, let me let just Evan kind of explain that process. But
and of course, this comes post-funding. One of the requirements is each recipient of the HUD funds must conduct an activity to further fair housing. That's been around for 40 years. It's been involved for 40 years. And so the state has guidelines of activities that are allowable or not allowable, goals that each community or recipient of HUD funds can adhere to in order to further fair housing within their community. For instance, in the past, for some of the past programs we've done here, the options were to adopt a proclamation locally for recognizing and getting word out on fair housing, adopt a resolution. We have sent letters out to various realtors, lending institutions. I think was what was part of the last grant that we did here, CDBG grant, giving them information on the Fair Housing Act. So that's part of the implementation process of one of these grants.
Do we have to engage in an activity to bring people here?
To bring people here?
Yeah.
No. You would have to engage in an activity to get awareness out.
Okay.
Evan, if the house was sold before the lien expired, money would be refunded to?
The money first would be refunded to the grant recipient, the city, and then it would in turn be ultimately back to the state.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Do I have any comments from the crowd on this public hearing? Yes?
The way I understand it,
We need you to speak into the microphone so this is being streamed live.
I need your name.
Renee Oberher, the way I understand it, we're getting $500,000 and selecting 10 people to receive this in the area.
It's in, yes, in a neighborhood, in a dilapidated kind of area, yes. Yes.
And how is that process handled?
Well, there's been a committee.
Right, we have looked, the council gave me areas, but Evan and I went throughout the whole community and looked at various different areas to see where we thought might have the best chance of qualifying, because they do have to be owner occupied. It cannot be a lot of rental properties. And we selected several areas that were compact, because it has to be a small area. It can't be scattered. It has to be a small area. And we looked at three, we focused really on three that looked potentially most qualified. And with our engineering department, we did a map of those, and we were able to overlay onto that who owned the properties and where who had the utilities, whose name the utilities were in, which gave us a pretty good idea about whether they might be owner occupied or they might be rental properties. And then we looked to see which ones had what we thought were the most owner-occupied homes in the area that fit the criteria. And the area that we are proposing is the Darrell Avenue, Diane, Wayne Avenue, that little area right in there. And I sent letters to all of the people that own property in that area, and they came to a meeting last week, or some came, obviously not all of them came, and explained the program to them. Then the next step, there's a target area survey that we distributed then, and we'll be distributing more to those that didn't get them, to try to get the information that we need as far as whether they own the home or not, who lives there, their income levels. And when we get those back, then we'll have a better idea for sure if that area qualifies. If it doesn't, we'll have to go to our next best choice. But that seemed to be the most compact area that we can make the biggest difference in. And that's the important thing to the granting authority, is what area we can make an impact in. But we we drove around for several hours, just really, I knew the area, but also, and Evan has done many of these, so he has a much better eye of what would be the most successful. And that appeared to be the most, an area that was most compact, that could have some need that we can make a significant impact on.